I was doing some physical house cleaning around here, and this came across my mind because there was a situation that I came across not too long ago. A friend of mine were talking. I mean, they weren't upset or anything, but just talking about how things are going on in their life. And she was talking about, in a previous marriage, how her and her husband never did see eye to eye about how things were handled in the household. And the number one reason is when she wanted to make changes and make progress, he would always buck against her. And I'm going to tell you one of the ways he did it. Now, gentlemen, when you go into a relationship, you are a decision maker. Some of you, depending on your background, are designated as the head of the household. But that's a huge responsibility. You're now responsible for the other person you pledge yourself to and anybody else who comes along. So therefore, before things get any further, it's good to establish certain ground rules. The two of you need to discuss as adults. What kind of spiritual beliefs are you going to have? Because you're both together now. How are you going to exercise those beliefs? How are you going to conduct yourself on a daily basis? How are you going to interact with your family? Do you have the same communication styles? And I know this sounds strange. I guess you guys probably figured they should have had this conversation before they went down the aisle. But that's not necessarily true in a lot of cases. A lot of people don't have this conversation before they go down the aisle. It's unfortunate, but it's true. And you need to discuss finances and how they're going to be handled in detail. Adult conversations. Adult conversations. Before you go any further, before you get further, into your responsibilities as a couple, before you start to increase your family, if you want to bring children into it, you need to have this before, because once those wheels start turning, there's not going to be time for a discussion. You can't put the brakes on everything once these things start. You're going to have to start exercising whatever rules you established. And I'm going to tell you what happened with this young lady. When she was married to a gentleman before, they had extreme physical attraction. They liked a lot of the same things. And for the most part, their conversation was fine. But they avoided dealing with the serious things before they got married. So when serious issues came up, they realized that they were on two totally ends of the spectrum. Well, first of all, before they got married, they didn't establish what type of beliefs that they had and whether or not they could live with those beliefs. And when they got together, he found out that she was a little bit more involved in her church than he thought. I mean, he knew that she was going to church, but he never did take the time to go. He never worshiped with her. He was never interested in worshiping with her. But I mean, he was very patient. He went ahead and he said, okay, that's what she does. But see, that was when he was single and alone. They didn't discuss whether or not if she was going to convert to his style of living or if he was going to convert to her style of living. They didn't have that discussion, so they figured they'll just keep on doing what they were doing when they were both single. He let her go ahead and do what she wants to do. If she goes to church on Saturday or Sunday, he would go hang out with the boys, play basketball, do the guy thing or whatever until she comes home. But the thing is that as time went further along, he started to get a little bent out of shape about it, especially when they started to discuss children and how that was going to factor into the picture, because he did not want the children to be that heavily involved with the church as she was. You see what I'm talking about, people? You see what I'm talking about here? They haven't discussed the kind of education that they want the children to have. They haven't discussed, even though they lived in a good-sized house, they haven't discussed whether or not they're going to raise the children in the same house, or whether or not they're going to, the type of education they're going to have. Are they going to be going to public school or private school? Or boarding school? I mean, these are details that need to be outlined. Their education is going to be the majority of their childhood. Their living conditions are going to be the majority of their childhood. And these things need to be established. And when they sat down and started having these conversations turn into arguments. Because what it is they wanted to be married, but they still wanted to do the things that they were doing before they got married as single people and not as a couple. They're a couple, yes. And yes, they did couple things. But when it came to things like, their spiritual beliefs, they have to combine their resources. That was another problem because he was living somewhere and she was living somewhere else. And even though they were both doing well, they had different ideas of how money should be spent in the household. She came from a household where, finances were distributed a certain way. He disagreed with that. She wanted to invest in more liquid assets and, more things like, playing the markets and cryptocurrencies and things like that. And he wanted to take the extra money and just buy land and vehicles. I know this sounds a little bit spoiled, but I mean, people are having these discussions every single day. I mean, it was just a situation where it just got to the point where, as far as their long-term goals of how they were going to handle things, they were not addressed. But the biggest thing was the spiritual beliefs. And you know what they say about a family that worships together? She's going to church every single week and people are asking where her husband is. Okay? She's going to Bible study and car washes and cookouts and things associated with the church. And they're wondering where her husband is. And half the time she lies and said that he goes to work because she knows that a lot of the people that are serious in the church, they would have something to say about it. She was trying to avoid being confronted. But she knew that was the type of lifestyle he lived before they got together. It was assumed that when they got together that he would be attending services along with her. Because he knew how important it was. But then you have some people that figure, oh, well, once she marries me, all that's going to stop. And I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to address the gentleman on this thing. Now, this is one thing that y'all keep making this mistake on. And I don't understand where you're getting this information from. But if you see a woman is living a certain lifestyle when she's single and you get together with her and things progress, don't get me wrong. She understands what a wife has to do to be cooperative and submissive. And yes, I use the word submit again because I know nowadays it's a cuss word, whatever. Look up the definition of Merriam-Webster. The definition is not as bad. Y'all trying to demonize the word. But anyway, I digress. But you gentlemen figure once you put that ring on your finger that everything that she believed in, her whole value system and everything is supposed to go out the window and you're just supposed to do everything you say. And I don't know where y'all getting this information from, but you're taking your little bit of scripture that you did read out of context. Because that same scripture that told you that thing that's got so twisted in your head also told you that the family needs to worship together. Now, I know some women that, when they get with the husband could be devoted in his religion. And she could be acting the same way, totally resistant against it. Won't go to service, won't read, won't meditate, won't pray with him or anything else because that's his thing. So you got to come to an understanding. Come to a compromise. This is the time we need to compromise. And see, that's what made my friend's marriage fall apart because he was not willing to compromise. He was not raised up in a household where there was compromise. Daddy said what he had to say and everybody followed suit no matter how wrong and stupid it was. Because that's just the way it was. And so he grew up with that same mentality. And by the time they got married, he kind of switched up a tad and went into his father's attitude. And then she's wondering who the devil she's living with. Y'all got to be careful, people. You're taking for granted your position in people's life. Don't do that. There's some of you women that'll try to go into the relationship. Everything's fine till you get that ring on your finger. And all of a sudden you're barking like a dog and screeching like a banshee. And the man's wondering who he's married to. But the bottom line is this. Getting married is not all about taking somebody off the market and having a great relationship and your house goes flutter every time you see them. There you got to sit down and decide, does this person have the same belief system that I have, and are we willing to work together to exercise? I know some people where the man is Muslim and the woman is Christian, and they both go to each other's services. How about that? Now, I don't know if that's supposed to be something that's okay in the Muslim community. I don't know. My Muslim brothers might want to reach out to me on that. And they get along fine, and they've been together for over 23 years. 23 years. She participates in his activities, and she is welcome at the mosque. He participates in her activities. He's welcome at the church. The people know him. They know her. And they raise their children to appreciate both religions. And that's what they do, because they compromise. They work together. They decided that their union and their family that they're building was way more important than the differences in the religions. Because the differences in the religions are going to be there, yes. But what's the likelihood that you're going to have what you have with this person with someone else? Is it risk throwing it away? So I just put that out there because there's some of you right now, everything is great in your relationship, but until it comes down to the religion or the spirituality and how you exercise, both of you on, one's on the North Pole, the other's on the South Pole. You're all together on everything else, and that's not right. Fix that last piece. Come to an agreement. Come to a compromise. Maybe both of you can both get what you want and both be happy. Maybe you can coexist. Take time and do that. Because I'm not going to sit here on this channel and every time there's a difference and I tell people leave, leave, leave. I've had a couple of audios where there's situations where you do need to walk out the door. But if there's a chance that you can compromise and save it, save it. Do that. Okay? Have a great day.